Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Tommy O'Brien, coming to you live from TFNN. Thanks for kicking off your Friday afternoon right here. We got less than an hour left to go in trading, and we got some market action. Markets in the green, as it seems like importers are going to get some refunds when you talk about taxes. But guess what? Not quite sure. It was all doom and gloom ahead of time, right? What the president was saying, he was saying we're screwed. We're going to have to give back all this money. It's going to ruin the country. Can't do it, all this stuff. And now that we've found out that the Supreme Court says that, no, the president does not have the power to tax in that manner, you have the Treasury Secretary saying the tariff revenue isn't going to change. Don't worry. That's not what we heard ahead of time. That's what he's saying right now. The truth probably lies somewhere in between, and we will find out. But checking out the charts, S&Ps right now, right near the highs of the session. You were as high as 69.31, but as you can see, we were up here at about almost noon. You were up there at about 11 a.m. as well. You dipped as low as 68.70, and right now we're pushing near those highs. S&Ps up by 44 points, or 0.6%. NASDAQ 100 up by 0.8%, 203 points in the green, 25,063. The Dow up 189 points right now, or 0.4%, 49,645 in the Russell. Particularly weak. Only index in the red right now. You're off by 0.2%, 2663 in the Russell. You jump over to yields. Not a huge reaction in yields right now. You got a little movement in the dollar, but look at the volatility in the 10-year. What? You did spike to 112.23, but we're right back to where we were prior to that number in terms of the tariff decision. You got the 10-year right now, negative by one tick, 4.07 is the yield on the 10-year. Still low yield. The dollar was up near 98 when we got that news. You spiked lower, we bounced around a bit. You get the dollar trading at 97.79 right now. And metals are catching a bid yet again. Let's check out the volume in this metals market, and then we'll jump back to the indices. So we got highs out here from February 11th, folks, of 51.44. Let's jack it up. This your daily we're looking at? All right, you're going to have a little volume today. We are, for the first time. We're at 120,000 contracts. I imagine it's going to be a decent final hour. We'll get some volume on the close of the day and the week. But even look, are we going to get to 160? We might. We're at 120 right now. It's a big day in gold, up $106. Still only 120,000 contracts, though, right? Tariff Friday? Are you kidding me? Tariff Friday? We can't get volume in the gold market? Nothing like what we were doing at one point, folks, on that run higher. Since then, it's a different world in terms of the volume in this metals market right now. Silver, same deal. You know, more volume than the record life volume we had the last couple of days, but you're at 50,000 contracts in silver. A few days ago, you did 71,000. You did 85. You were pushing 150,000 on big days, if not 200 recently. And right now, we're at 50,000 contracts. 50. A quarter of the daily volume on some of these big days. And I'm not even picking the historic days out there. Okay, well, you got 300,000 contracts. I'm talking about how often you did between 150 to 200,000 contracts on big days in the silver market. We're at 50,000 contracts today. Platinum right now, up $108, trading at 21.77. You jump over to copper, up 13 pennies. Yeah, how about natural gas? Talking about natural gas in the den. Quite a slide after we spike on that storm. 743, we roll over, and now we're at the next contract, and you got natural gas back at 304. So, in replacing the IEEPA tariffs, looks like the starting point, we'll call it, is 10%. Now, you have the Treasury Secretary saying the revenue is going to be unchanged. You have to chuckle, folks. Okay, the rhetoric, and hey, rhetoric comes out everywhere, okay? But the rhetoric prior to this getting struck down versus afterwards, it's always the end of the world versus it's not, whether the president gets his way or not. And this is what was getting written last month. We're screwed, Trump warns, if they rule against us, okay? As in, it's not going to be that dire. He's got different avenues, okay? President's going to be able to apply tariffs, and the country's not screwed. We'll be just fine. And a very conservative Supreme Court. I encourage you to go listen to those arguments, because if you listen to the arguments, you would not be surprised. Whether you agree with those arguments or not, you would not be surprised from the decision they handed down if you were listening to the oral arguments, okay? And it's history, folks. It's great to hear legal minds arguing about a monumental Supreme Court decision. I listened to it because it's a historic event. Of course it is. If they had approved that, implications potentially for generations. Period. End of sentence. And that's maybe the reason why they didn't. sure they have their reasons. But the oral arguments, they were indicative of the skepticism, even in most of the conservative members of the court, in terms of allowing any president. It's not just the president you like, folks. You want to give presidents the power so that when people get in office that you don't like have that power. That's the power you want to give people, okay? And that's the power they have, as in, you want to make sure when you're fighting for those powers that when the guy gets in or the girl gets in office, that eventually will happen, that you just can't stand and disagree with, that they don't have powers that go against what was up there. So, hey, because one of the points they made in those oral arguments was that many things they struck down against Biden he could have done if he had just applied IEPA. And you can say, well, maybe he should have, right? But the implication goes on in terms of the raw power to take that taxation. And yes, it's imports. We know the arguments, okay? But you got a very conservative Supreme Court that today said they are not comfortable giving the president the power of taxation, okay? And they probably could have added that China ain't paying those taxes either, because they ain't. They're taxes on Americans, folks, okay? The consumer bears the brunt of it. It's taxes. It has nothing to do with Congress. And we'll see where he shifts from here, but the first spot is 10%. And yeah, that was the battle prior. That's not the case. Okay, talking about that there's no way that we could give the money back, right? The amount of payback if they rule, right? When these investments are added, you're talking trillions. It may not be possible. If it were, the dollars, it would be so large, it would take many years to figure out, and it's going to be quite a refund process. But then you got the Treasury Secretary saying this, okay? This is not politics, right? We want to keep the politics, the partisan BS out of everything. Talking about how the day before you get ruled against, it's going to be the end of the world if you get ruled against. And then the day you get ruled against, saying revenue is not even going to change from the tariffs that we get. Well, that's a much different story. And go figure. The president was exaggerating with the doom and gloom if he was not giving unilateral power to tax. Turns out the Treasury Secretary, President Trump's Treasury Secretary, says that's not true. Okay? That's not true. We're going to take in just as much revenue, folks, even if the president does not have that unilateral power under IEPA. Virtually unchanged. Where was that one, right? Yeah. Surprise, surprise. That's the facts, folks, from the Treasury Secretary himself. Tariff revenue unchanged. We're coming right back.